Welcome, everyone, to the Sleeping with Sonja podcast. It's our first time here together, so I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself. You see, I'm sitting here in this really beautiful studio with this incredible team, and honestly, I have to ask myself, what the fuck? What is going on here? How did I get to this place where I could sit and talk to all of you about things that make me curious, things that make me fascinated, things that really sort of inspire me and give me a sense of purpose in my life? Because you see, this glitz and this glamour, this beautiful studio, this amazing lighting, this fancy microphone, this all feels incredibly foreign to me. Because every single day I walk into a room and I have to convince myself that I'm not faking it. I have to tell myself that I deserve a seat at that table, that I've earned it, that I've worked for it, that for some reason people care what I have to say. And in today's world where we can be bombarded with what feels like pure narcissism, we look at social media and see people share every aspect of their lives. We open up our camera rolls and see selfies galore, and you stop and think to yourself, why does any of this matter? You know, why would anybody give a shit as to what I have to say and what my journey is and what my story may have been? But the reality is, I don't think I ever had anyone like me growing up to look to see as some sort of an inspiration. Because the fact of the matter is, I may look like some blonde woman with glasses who fell out of some sort of a pajama catalog. But the reality is, I am fucking weird. I have always been weird. I have felt different for my entire life. And it's thanks to this sense of, I don't know, strangeness, this connection to things that are beyond myself, this incessant need to grow and to learn and to want to gain more from life, that's led me to this place. It's taken me from somebody who lived in a constant state of moving along a prescribed path, living a life that felt like a journey like anyone else would want to live. And honestly, it's helped me to shake my entire world up. For those of you who do follow me, my name is Dr. Sonja Mitrevska. I'm a certified registered nurse anesthetist, a best-selling author, a public speaker, and now a podcast host. But that's not where I came from. And I think it's important for us to all recognize that the people that we may admire, or the people who inspire us, or the people who encourage us, we all have stories. We all have a truth. We all have a journey that got us to this place. And for me, so much of that journey stems from, I grew up as the child of Eastern Bloc immigrants in a tiny apartment upstairs from Cuban neighbors who would kick a soccer ball in the morning, and what appeared to be the ghost of a dead old lady in our apartment. My mom and dad came from Macedonia before they had my sister and me. And for those of you who've never heard of it before, it's actually a real country. It's a tiny country in the Eastern Bloc that used to be a part of Yugoslavia. And you see, my parents came from farmlands. They grew up with very little. They had modest beginnings. My father has a 7th grade education, and my mother had dreams and aspirations of being a journalist and a writer. She was brilliant in school, but she left those dreams aside because for them, the idea that they could have more for their future family someday meant giving up the world they had known and starting from scratch. So when they came to the United States and lived in a basement apartment, working odd jobs. My mom was a meat cutter in a deli. My dad was a butcher for many, many years, physically doing work, manual labor that most people would not always dream of. My sister and I saw this and knew that we couldn't let them down. We had seen their sacrifices. We had seen what they had given so that we could have this life, so that we could have these opportunities. And so growing up, I was always a curious little kid. I was blessed with something of a photographic memory. So I would literally read the pages of a dictionary that was purchased at a garage sale. I still remember to this day, the first few pages were torn off. So the word aardvark was at the beginning of the book. And I tell you this to say that when you feel the weight of the world on your shoulders, when you feel like your own legacy is something that is a form of gratitude to those before you, it's a lot of fucking pressure. And with that pressure, you tend to make choices in your life that feel like they're going to be a sure thing. You're going to be a doctor, or you're going to be a lawyer, or you're going to be an engineer, and you're going to get married, and you're going to have children, and you're going to buy a home and have a 30-year mortgage and a 401k and retire at 65. And as nice as all that sounds for some people, that never felt like me. That never felt like the person that I know myself to be sitting here today. And so I did my best. I tried. I started off studying pre-medicine and got a scholarship to college until my mom got sick. And when she was diagnosed with cancer, I knew that being far away from home wasn't going to work for me. And so I left behind the life of being a teenager and adopted the role of being a caregiver and a caretaker. And this was before I ever even thought about or dreamed about becoming a nurse. Because what you guys have to understand is, for those of us who have families who come from other places, there's a different perception of what we do here versus what's done there. And so for my parents who had sacrificed everything, they wouldn't have known what a nurse actually does, what the heart of the profession is, how much they take on, what their clinical skill set and relevance is. And so I thought I wanted to become a doctor until I met the doctors who changed my life and rocked my world and made me see what felt like my life was crumbling before my very eyes. And I said, I can't do that. I don't think I could ever set foot in a hospital again. I don't think 18-year-old me will ever recover from this moment. And so instead of being a doctor, I decided I would become a lawyer. I changed my major to English. I studied literature. I went to Shakespeare class. And I did the very things that every immigrant parent fears. I said, I want to be creative. I want to write. I want to pull things out of my mind and let them bleed onto a keyboard. Well, that wasn't really going to fly. So instead, I decided I'd go to law school. And I took a job in the corporate world. I worked for a major media company in the heart of Times Square. And it was a lot like The Devil Wears Prada. And there were moments when I thought to myself, I don't know what I want to do for the rest of my life, but surely this isn't it. And again, this is not to knock the people who enjoy a sense of consistency. This is not to knock people who love a sense of routine and structure. But for me, I never felt like I fit into just one thing. I never felt like I could just be one person. You know, I wanted to be somebody who loved biology as much as I loved writing. I wanted to be someone who learned 12 different languages. I wanted to be someone who understood the lived experience beyond my own little bubble. And so I left that job. At the height of the recession, I left that job. And I went back to being a waitress and a bartender. And I put myself through nursing school. And if there's one thing that becoming a nurse has ever taught me, one thing that I will never, ever regret in my entire life, it's that there is power in resilience that goes far beyond anything you ever dreamed you possessed. I worked as a nurse for nearly 6 years before going back to graduate school and getting my doctorate in anesthesia. And during this time, I had another sort of dilemma, a crisis of sorts. I did things that I felt I was supposed to do and not the things that I wanted to do. And I did so because we are taught from a very young age that saying no means you're not a team player. It makes you selfish. It means that you don't put other people ahead of yourself, and there's a negative stigma associated with that. And so instead of living the life that I thought I wanted to live, instead of pursuing what my true passions were, I stayed the course and did the right thing. I got married. I tried hard to want children, and I applied and got into graduate school. And during this time, I got a phone call from my mom's doctor. I was at work in a busy cardiothoracic ICU with 2 critically ill patients. And I received a call that they had found a mass on my mother's lung. The PET scan results did not look good. And he told me they would need further answers, that she'd probably need surgery at minimum, and possibly would need to go through treatment once again. And so I went into an empty room where a few of my friends came in and held me as I had a panic attack on a garbage can. And all I could say over and over again was, I cannot do this again. How am I supposed to do this again? And so when reality strikes and you're in the midst of a setting where you are literally putting out fires, you are keeping people alive in the throes of their own trauma. I had gotten into graduate school at the time, and I knew in my gut there was no way that I could go and leave my family. There was no way that I could pursue what everybody else thought I should be doing, because I needed to come back to myself. And so I sat in a hospital room at 3:00 in the morning at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center after my mom had a chunk of her lung removed. She had finally fallen asleep after many hours of tremendous pain. And I started to write her eulogy. Then I stopped myself. And I picked up the piece of paper and I threw it out. And I took out another sheet in my notebook. And I wrote down a bucket list by my 30th birthday. And I decided that I wanted to write a book. I had no idea how to write a book. I had no idea how to publish a book, but I knew it was something that I felt like I had to do. And so I deferred my enrollment and I gave up what everybody told me would be a dream scenario. I had gotten into an Ivy League university where I could study anesthesia and graduate and live a very comfortable life. But the reality was I didn't thrive in comfort. I thrived in chaos. I thrived in growth, and I thrived in change. So I gave up my spot, and I wrote my first book in 3 months. And during those 3 months, the cells of my mom's tumor were sent to the Mayo Clinic and studied repeatedly. Because as it turned out, it wasn't metastatic after all. The mass was benign, and she wouldn't need further treatment. And by some grace of God, I was able to continue down a path that felt like it would serve me. And so I accidentally wrote my first bestseller. I had no idea what I was doing. I found a publisher in Ohio that was cheap, and I put it on Amazon and accidentally developed a social media following because of it. And so sitting here in front of you all as an intensely introverted person, as somebody who is quite private, sitting here in front of a microphone on a camera feels very unnatural to me. And yet I feel like it does matter. Because again, that odd little girl who never really saw herself in anyone else, who sort of chameleoned her way through life, she would need to see and hear what it is that's being shared today. And so, as we do, as people pleasers who sort of can't get out of our own way, I ended up taking a spot in a different program and pursued my doctorate in anesthesia. And one of my biggest regrets in life, and I don't harbor many, is that I didn't stop to take time from that intense, challenging, tragic ICU job before diving into anesthesia school, because the reality is we could all use a minute to breathe. We could all use time to come back to who we are, to come back to our center. And I know with full certainty that if you have ever experienced functional depression, functional burnout, where you could still go to work every day and do your job and appear perfectly fine to everyone else, but know that inside you feel nothing at all, I wish I would have listened to that voice, because it would have made me pause. But that's not what we do, right? When you're a high achiever and you're accustomed to a certain way of living, you simply get through it. You tell yourself, everyone has these moments. Everyone has these challenges. I am no different, no better. I am not special. And so I entered graduate school and finally allowed myself to breathe with the onset of a global pandemic. Because you see, the entire world stopped and the entire world shut down. And when I experienced in succession a divorce, and then a few weeks later, my mom passing away unexpectedly, I knew in that moment what it meant to be rock bottom. I knew that life had tried to whisper in terms of the direction of my movement. I knew that the universe was telling me to follow my heart and to come back to my spirit, but I didn't listen because I had exams to pass and I had classes to take and I had patients to care for. And so as the world shut down and I had a few weeks to breathe, living in a tiny apartment, isolated from the world, not really sure if any of us would survive, really, I went through a period where I finally told myself, if you don't make a change, you're going to lose every part of the person you once were. If you don't do the things that you need to do for yourself, if you don't find a way back to your roots, you're going to drown. And so in a manner that felt almost ludicrous, ridiculous, I essentially started Meditation 101. I felt entirely foolish. I felt totally stupid, but I would set my alarm clock for 3 o'clock in the morning because I had to leave for the hospital by 3:30 most days. And I would force myself into a state of stillness. And at first it felt so juvenile and so absurd. And I would sit there and almost laugh to myself about the fact that I was simply wasting my own time. And then it started to work. Then I started to fall asleep the moment my head hit the pillow. Then I started to realize that maybe we don't need to be thinking 1 year or 5 years or 10 years down the future. Maybe where we need to be is right here, right now. And so it turns out that when you finally allow yourself to open to that inner voice, when you finally listen to your intuition instead of the noise of everyone around you, instead of the opinions of everyone, whether they love you or not, it's still their own and not your truth. When you finally let that light in, there's a lot of darkness that can come with that release. But there's also a huge sense of liberation. And so I finally felt liberated to be the person that I know myself to be. I felt like I had come back to this inquisitive and doe-eyed sense of person that I had lost for so many years. And as I continued through the pandemic and graduating and going through my mom's death and dealing with a divorce, I realized that rock bottom is actually a fine place to visit once in a while, because it shows you a sense of perspective that you would never achieve otherwise. And so it wasn't my flashy degree or my title that helped me through it. It was daily practices in gratitude. It was a shift in my own spirituality. It was remaining fully present even when the moment was less than perfect. It was leaning into love with the relationships around me among family and friends and the people who always supported me. And it was recognizing the fact that at the end of the day, if you're not happy, none of this matters at all. Your inner being, your sense of happiness has nothing to do with dollar signs. It has nothing to do with your degrees. It has nothing to do with buying fancy new clothes. It's an inner light that shines within you. And we as a society have become so distracted by everything around us that we fail to romanticize the simple things, the beautiful moments, the moments where, even like right now, as I look around the room and I have this sort of pinch me moment where you can really give thanks for the fact that we even have this opportunity to share these connections with one another. And so today, as I sit here introducing myself in what doesn't really feel like a warm and bubbly and effervescent light, I think it's important. And I think it's necessary for you to understand that you can be very many things as you evolve and as you grow. And you can own the person that you were. You can own the stories that shaped you. You can own the really shitty times and use them to evolve and to grow. Because through everything I've been through in this life, through heartache and pain of unspeakable proportions, not just professionally, but personally, I can tell you wholeheartedly that I am the happiest I have ever been in my entire life. And there is such power in the energy that you project in this world. There is such power in knowing that you matter, despite what you may think inside of the back of your head, despite the fact that you walk in and feel imposter syndrome no matter where you go. You do matter, and you are worthy, and your voice does make a difference. And so here at the Sleeping with Sonja show, we are going to laugh, and we're going to have fun, and we're going to learn an awful lot about everything. And trust me, I mean everything. But we're also going to think, and we're going to connect, and we're going to have these moments where we can feel seen by somebody who we may not have had in our younger selves. So I want to thank you all for joining me on this wild ride. Never in a million years did that little girl in that 2-bedroom apartment ever think she'd be sitting here with a show of her own, connecting with strangers around the world. So thank you, not only for Sleeping with Sonja, and yes, the name is hilarious, okay? It's because I give anesthesia, but you can take it as you will. But also for being a part of my life in these last few years and for coming along in the rest of this journey with me. I think that we have a really incredible show for you guys. I think that you're going to learn things you never would have dreamed. I'm hoping it's a space where you feel like for a few minutes once a week, you can let everything aside and laugh and grow and introspect and reflect. And if nothing else, you have a little bit of a distraction from the day-to-day monotony of your life. And so today I ask you, romanticize your day. Look at that cup of coffee and tell it how delicious it is. Take a walk around the park and literally smell the roses. Call or text somebody you love and just let them know you're thinking of them. Find a way to be present. to feel gratitude and to give thanks for every opportunity. And I promise you, your life will be totally different by the end. Thank you guys for sharing with me, for joining me, and for sleeping with Sonja.